delivered a really powerful and rousing keynote this morning, and I think it resonated with a lot of people by the reactions that I saw in the audience. It was patriotism over profit, building a more secure Canada, right? And you did a lot of things in that talk, from talking about where you come from. You talked about scorecards and what things could look like and how to get there. It was really amazing, first of all. So thanks for delivering that. I think it had real impact. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about your keynote. Just give us a few highlights from that.
Well, the first thing is that I don't have all the answers. What I have is a career working in the military that transitioned into the private sector, that dealt a lot with the public sector and consulting, and been around different organizations. And I have a bit of an idea of how the problem statements impact folks in industry at the operator level and then in leadership. And then obviously, I've done a little bit of political organizing work as well. I've done a lot of work in Parliament. I've done work representing my ethnic community. So I kind of understood the mechanism of how political infrastructure works in Canada. My issue is that we in Canada, in industry and outside of it, have taken this position where everything that is actually substantive in terms of a challenge that we need to fix, it's too big, it's too expensive, it's too political. No one actually wants to invest in making change. No one actually wants to put forward substantive ideas that address real issues. Everyone's looking for piecemeal solutions that are quick wins, that they can collect in their own little personal empire of profit or influence, and then they carry on. When I made my speech this morning, I don't want to be the guy. I'm not positioning myself as someone who wants to run for office or be some cyberstar. My point is that we need to look at what is actually happening in a real grassroots operator level, what is happening at the policy level, what is happening with business management, what is happening in the boardroom when they're shareholders, and why is it that we can't actually unify as a Canadian industry to defend Canada? Because right now, the only people that we can rely on, outside of our European allies and anything, I don't want to rely on external parties. We are a big and powerful enough country to be self-sufficient with our own talent, with our own resources, with our own way of doing things. And then we can be real leaders and global players in the world. But if we don't figure out what this thing is of unifying Canada and unifying our approach to defending our networks and our digital economy, we are going to be picked apart, as we've been traditionally.
Absolutely. I really liked how you prioritize that as well, figuring out who we are first before we go out and figure out how we work with everyone else.
Yes.
Because, are they farther ahead than we are, would you say?
I think other countries, especially within the Five Eyes Alliance, are more mature in their cohesion and unity as it stands to external parties. They're going to have their own internal policy fights, they have their own fights for funding and mandates, etc. But I think, if you look at America, the whole Buy America thing, America First, they built pipelines for their veterans to become entrepreneurs and get funding and get discounts and get deals. They built pipelines for folks even in their Indigenous communities to participate in the business enterprise. They built direct pipelines to go from secondary, post-secondary, into the workforce in a qualified manner where they're paid. We seem to refuse to invest in developing in the people who then create the processes that then manifest into new technologies that can actually proliferate our workforce and our economies. We do not want to actually take a bet on Canada as Canadians, in my opinion. We like to say we do, but in terms of action, in terms of where that money goes, it's still going down south. If I'm a real innovator, I want to make my little product just good enough to get acquired by America, or I'm just going to move to Silicon Valley or Austin or New York. That shouldn't be the case anymore. We have the talent, we have the infrastructure, we need to have the political will, and political will is an issue that's outside of tech. It has to become an electoral level issue, in my opinion.
So if I was to ask you, who would you like to see more engaged in this conversation, who would that be?
Obviously, our current Prime Minister, our current cabinet. The fact is that, a conference like this in Ottawa, with the amount of stakeholders at the table, and I could be wrong, I hope I'm wrong, I don't see any representative from the federal government here. I don't see any representative from our current governing party here. We apparently have a Minister of AI. Where is anyone from his office? Where is he? Right? That's a problem. That means a lack of buy-in at the industry level by government. They have their chosen players because it's always comfortable to choose the chosen players. And that's another big part of my issue. The politics behind the procurements of yesterday and today need to end. We need to break that system because that system reinforces profiteering for a select few. We need to open up opportunity for everyone.
Seems like a really good case for saying the behaviors that got us here aren't the ones that are going to move us forward in any meaningful way.
Correct.
Do you agree?
Yes.
What are some of the behaviors that we need then to move forward with?
We need to actually be willing to take a chance on a new innovation, to be able to adopt it. Like I said in my talk, Canada has an absolute, we'll say allergy to adopting new technology first. We don't want to adopt new technology first, right? We want to go with the tried and true, trusted. We don't care about the outcome. We just know that the brand has its stability.
Everyone else is using it.
Everyone else is using it. Why wouldn't we? And that's really the crux of the problem, right? We're giving our money and our resource to the same organizations that have failed to deliver for us for decades. Why? And we are stifling Canadian innovation. Who wants to be a Canadian entrepreneur? Who wants to start a startup here? Is it worth it? All you're trying to do is be acquired by Americans anyway, if you're that serious about it. Rarely do you meet any Canadian who actually wants to build a startup for the sake of running their startup and taking it to market maturity. Because all they're trying to see is the dollars, because that's the only thing that's realistically possible based on what industry has been up to this point. If we can create an environment where entrepreneurs can flourish and we can have real competition amongst Canadians, and where it makes sense, allow external parties and external organizations to bid and to compete, which should be fair. That would be something more ideal. But I mean, you look at even an issue like data sovereignty. We don't have a proper Canadian cloud service provider that could host business and government with the same capacity and scalability as an AWS or a Microsoft. And I say this as someone that works with AWS in my own commercial career. I have no issue with them. But we're not talking about that from a pure commercial standpoint. We're talking about that in how do we strengthen Canada and how do we take an economic approach to strengthen Canada. And I think that's the conversation I'm trying to get people to think about. Again, I don't have the answers. I just have a solid suggestion because I don't want to admire the problem. I want to be solution and action oriented, and I hope other people would be too.
I love the conviction behind your words and the clarity with which you articulate them. One of the things that I think is important is also how, you started this interview by saying you don't have all the answers, right? You were vulnerable for a moment in your speech when you said that you don't always get it right with the profit over patriotism, for instance. Can you tell that story?
Yeah, it's really just an issue of, if you leave uniform life, for example, or you're just coming into industry, you might have ideals, and you might have certain things that you consider your values. As you progress, as you grow, as your career progresses, you essentially want to benefit from the fruitful success of your labor. You want more money, you want the contracts, you want the bonuses, you want the shares. But the problem is you get into this toxic loop, almost of an addiction to growth. And I think at a whole of economy level, we have an addiction to growth. We have a whole addiction to satisfying shareholders over stakeholders. And I think that's a big part of the economic problem now generally, especially in a post-COVID economy. I'm trying to bring things back to a place where I'm not opposed to people doing well. I'm not opposed to good ideas winning. I'm not opposed to people who are more competitive winning. What I am opposed to is putting the priorities of shareholders and money over the fact that we should be thinking about things as Canadians first and foremost. And if we lose that, then we lose the ability to defend ourselves when, the international supply chains that we've integrated ourselves into because of their own politics become unavailable to us.
Absolutely. Great. Well, I'd like to just end off on a moment about community. You have been a big supporter of the community at large, as well as the BSides community in particular. Why do you do that?
I think, for my own selfish reasons, I'm a big believer of owning my own recruitment process. So if I want to hire people for whatever project or entity I'm working for or working on, I want to know that I've known them for a period of time. And instead of going through long-winded, hiring processes or just filtering through resumes and applications, coming to events and meeting people at various points of their career, building real relationships, real working chemistry, so I know them. I really know them, not when there's an actual, economic interest at play for them, but we're just getting to know each other, we're just dealing with each other, we're building mutual respect. And then when I know what they're good at and what they enjoy doing, when the right opportunity comes, the trust is there. So I have an entire network, let's say I might be building a startup of some kind. Let's say at some point I might get some funding and actually be able to scale it out. I have an entire army of people that are already willing to come work with me once I can actually fund it. And it's kind of like the way that we as leaders need to own our own kind of recruitment. Not to say that recruiters can't do a good job or that kind of thing. I know a lot of great recruiters, but we can't rely on the traditional system. Like the LinkedIn system, the Indeed system, it's no real good.
Yeah.
But if I can take you and I can help develop you and I'm willing to invest in you and coach you and build you up, and you trust me and I trust you, when that moment of opportunity comes, it becomes something that's mutually beneficial for both of us and we both win. And you'll actually you'll care enough, trying to filter my words, you'll care enough to want to give it your best. And I'll care enough to want to succession plan you and give you a satisfactory work experience.
It's beautiful. I hope that more people learn to build their own networks that way through communities like this one and take the time to make those connections real.
It's a great
like
job,
you
Amy.
do.
Appreciate you.
Well, thank you for your leadership on these subjects and for connecting a lot of really important dots at this point in time.
Really excited to come back to our nation's capital and to contribute specifically to the policy village. This is something that I feel really passionate about. I think there's a desperate need for all of us in the community to contribute back to policymakers, legislators, and others, because these are really complex issues and they're doing their best to try and wrestle them, but they need our help.
Absolutely. And so your talk today was something about Welcome to the Jungle. Can you explain the title a little bit?
Yeah, so I had a little bit of fun, obviously inspired by the song, but really a little bit about the journey I've gone on the last couple of years, learning about legislative process, being involved with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce's Cyber Council, and testifying to parliamentary committees and to the Senate on various issues related to cyber in terms of national security threats or legislation around critical cybersecurity infrastructure laws. So it's been fun to share that, to realize there's a lot of nuances and to give some context. Here's what the laws are, here's some of the gaps, here's why the approach we've seen, sort of understanding the context of the Trudeau era digital charter and the policy objectives that we were chasing for, why things have kind of gone off the rails, where they have gone off the rails, and where things stand. Had a really great attendance, lots of fantastic engagement and questions, and there's one thing that's never a shortage in this information security, hacker, cybersecurity community, it's passion for the topic. So now we just got to give some confidence to go out to the public and have these conversations.
Amazing. I think a lot of people might feel kind of underinformed to even participate in the discussion. Is there something that you do that can help with that, or you can suggest to help with that?
Well, I think this being the second year that they've done the Policy Village, and so the speaker before me, Lucas, did a great job of kind of revisiting that Civics 101. How do things become a law? Where do laws fit within the overall policy agenda of a government? And sort of help people understand who the players are and how the mechanics work. And what I try to do is say, and here's where the pieces are on the table. And here's where you can help move the next piece forward, particularly when we talk about Bill C8, which is the reboot of Canada's critical cyber protection laws.
Which is something that I understand many people were looking forward to.
yeah. So
at the time.
We need them because we're the last G7 country to have some kind of law in the books nationally to raise standards. And it's not to say that certain sectors of the economy haven't been taking this seriously. Banks, telecommunications in Canada have long time been leading, because of voluntary cooperation and understanding of the environment, also because their regulators in banking, for example, have been quite sophisticated. Others that have much smaller margins, different economic pressures like transportation industry or energy transmission haven't been investing, and we've had some awful near misses in this country. We found out because a U.S. intelligence officer decided to leak on Discord classified information that one of our major pipelines was attacked, that the group that attacked it sought permission from Russian officials to try and make it go boom, and got it, but they didn't succeed, thankfully. Right. But we need to make sure they don't succeed.
Absolutely. And then would you say that some people had challenges where there might be, more room to interpret than they think?
Oh yeah, there is. Like, if there's one thing that many years of doing this now has taught me is that just because it's in a human readable format does not mean what you think it means in those words. And the good news is through getting a chance to meet some of the folks that actually wrote the legislation, working with public safety and going to the committee hearings and then watching other experts and the back and forth, you learn that everyone cares. We're all on the same team things aren't necessarily always the way that you read it. Sometimes they are, and so you need to call out government overreach or other things, but it's a really hard thing to do, but it's really important to realize 2 ears, one mouth, right? Listen twice as much as we contribute back, but we do have something important to say.
Absolutely. And who do you think, who would you love to see more engaged in these discussions?
I would love to see more of our deep technical folks who by nature tend to, trend-wise, be more introverted, to not be as comfortable being in front of a crowd talking about these things. Building those soft skills are really, really important for them as an individual, as professionals. And the reality is they have so much important things to say, to shed light on, to add context to. This morning I had a phenomenal talk with someone who's decades of experience in network engineering, and they had really insightful things to say about the Rogers outage here in Canada a couple of years ago and their perspective on it. Things I didn't even know the acronyms for. But once he explained them to me and taught me a little bit, it was incredibly interesting. That's just one example of the kind of experience we can bring to the table when we give people the skills and the confidence.
Amazing. Just another question about the BSides community and communities like this that are grassroots, that are nonprofit, that are very kind of people-driven kind of thing. What would you like to see in terms of that growth or impact, or any stories to tell about that impact?
So, the one insight I have about BSides, I have to give full credit to a gentleman by the name of Casey Ellis, and he's a founder of a very successful cybersecurity company, and he gave a talk at BSides Las Vegas this summer, and he talked about the challenge of the old fool and the young fool. And to paraphrase, the old fool looks at new knowledge and dismisses it. And the young fool says, oh, that's old information, we don't need to have it. And both are fallacies about it. BSides is the opportunity for generations to mix and to exchange ideas and to get around the trap of the old fool and the young fool. And they're unique in the cybersecurity industry, and this is Casey's point, and I believe it. Having seen so many of them, from St. John's, Newfoundland, to Vancouver, to here in Ottawa, to San Francisco and Las Vegas, and many, many more. I love these. But this is the chance to cross those generational divides and pass on that knowledge. And so they're incredibly important. They started from the folks that didn't get the chance to speak at Black Hat or at a DEF CON. But there's something even more powerful now.
There is. You can feel it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. For sure. Anything else that you care to share?
No, I love seeing the increased representation of all kinds of different groups. I think it's amazing how much work and thoughtfulness has been put into making this a comfortable, safe space. And I hope those who maybe are holding back to think, well, that's too much for me, or I'm not good enough for cyber. Yes, you are. Come on in and be welcome to the community. It's an incredibly supportive group, and there's a place for you.
That's what I've always found too. Thanks so much for that message, David.
You're very welcome.
Really appreciate it. Maybe you could give us a few, highlights just from your talk and what inspired it.
Thanks. Thanks for having us. What inspired the talk? Way too many problems and outages, and just kind of seeing the same patterns over and over again. I think it was Cheryl who came up with the idea of disabling civilization.
Amazing. And Cheryl is, of course, a returning guest on Wired for Change now.
Thank you so much, Amy. Yes, and Jim and I have these car talks, and it really was one of those 3-hour trips where it was like, what if? Well, wait a minute, and what if? And the next thing you know, it became it's kind of like that scene in War Games where they go, do you want to play a game? And we could say, yeah, what if you could disable critical infrastructure?
Yeah, one of the genesises for this was we got a chance to participate in Hackers on the Hill in Washington, D.C. at the final ShmooCon earlier this year in January. And we were part of a group that gave a briefing to the U.S. Select Committee on Intelligence, to the staffers. And one of the things they wanted to talk about was critical infrastructure protection. And one of my opening statement to them is, what if I told you that I could disable most telecommunications and internet in any given U.S. city in a single night by myself and probably not get caught? And they said, tell us more. And they actually let us leave afterwards, so I guess we did okay.
Yeah, amazing. You both have, quite a lot of experience, I think. Maybe tell us a little bit more about your experience and what you're bringing to BSides.
Well, let Jim talk about that.
Well, as I said in my introduction of the talk, I'm one of the grumpy old men of the internet. I've been on the internet since 1987, and I've been building internet infrastructure professionally since '92. Not my entire career. I've done a great many things throughout my career. I've done an awful lot of consulting for many different organizations. So I've seen a lot of things, but almost always I've been involved in some sort of infrastructure building, whether it was for an organization or a corporation or a bank or some other entity, or for the internet itself. It all comes down to, how do we move bits around a building or a campus or a continent to access the services that we all need and love, which are apparently lots of cat videos. Funny cat videos make the world go round. So in that, my whole career, I've just seen a lot of kind of repeating patterns of failure and kind of the same sort of basic mistakes that get made over and over again by each new successive generation, whether they're engineers or business leaders, and kind of a failure to really consider the fundamentals, particularly when it comes to uptime and reliability.
Yeah, along those lines, Jim, what do you think the general public would be surprised to learn?
I think the general public would be surprised to learn just really how fragile all of these systems are. And, there's some very interesting photo illustrations going around. They all kind of crib off of an original XKCD cartoon of like a Jenga tower of stack of blocks, and there's the one block on the bottom, and it usually says something like, unpaid open source developers or something like that. And that's true, pretty true, but there's many variations of that now, and people showing, AWS, Cloudflare, Azure. There's so much infrastructure that people take for granted, and people assume that this infrastructure is all maintained very well. They assume that it's built at the highest possible standards, and there's armies of technicians and glistening, gleaming, beautiful white vans that maintain all the infrastructure constantly, and nothing is ever out of place or forgotten about anywhere. And the reality is, so much of the critical infrastructure, particularly at the neighborhood, small town, and medium city level, is pretty much ignored and kind of left to rot on its own. Very common for me to see situations where there is a battery backup system that was installed 20 years ago, and it's never been maintained. The batteries were never replaced. So when there's a failure, it doesn't work because batteries have a finite lifespan. And that is one of the most basic, cheapest, easiest things for a infrastructure company to maintain, and they won't even do the basic stuff a lot of times. There's also a huge manpower shortage, as the experienced technicians are all really now of an age where they're retiring, they're dying off, and literally you would be surprised how much of our critical infrastructure is being maintained by literal gray-haired wizards that are in their 60s, even their 70s, people who have retired not only once but maybe twice from different organizations and have been brought back as consultants or brought back as very highly paid engineers because they're the only ones that know this particular system, and none of the new kids have been educated. A lot of it is also a failure of industry and of the businesses in general because they don't educate people. They don't invest in training anymore. It used to be that you would get hired on as an engineer or technician, and they might expect that it was going to take you a year to learn your job, and that you would be shadowing a master technician or a master engineer, and you'd be shown the ropes. And now they want to hire people with all the skills and experience. They want a unicorn, and then they don't give you any training, orientation, or anything. uh, in a lot of industries, they don't even give you your own tools. You have to supply your own tools to go out and maintain all this critical infrastructure.
Wow.
So it's really a very different world, and we're paying the price. It's hard for everybody to see it, but in the position that I'm in, where I deal with a lot of different organizations and a lot of different telcos and carriers, ILECs and CLECs and small internet providers, and it's not just in one location, it's all over.
Well, which is why, I think a lot of people appreciate, what you're sharing, and helping everyone to understand that is important. I mean, before I got into this area, I would have been surprised to learn any of that, and I guess, I can understand it, but it was surprising to me. So I think that's really helpful that you shared that. Cheryl, you talked a lot about resilience and community today. What do you think? And also at the end of your talk, somebody asked how do you guys sleep at night? So I'm wondering if you could tell us, what you think people should know moving forward.
I think the first thing is that it's a different world, and we do need to take preparation ourselves. We can't just function in a state of reliance. We have the opportunity to learn about personal cybersecurity, and we have the ability to do mandatory preparation in the event of outages and inclement weather, because we now live in a world where this is the new norm. So that would be my recommendation, is that, I hate to use this phrase, but it's very true, the cavalry isn't coming. We have become the cavalry. But in so doing, I believe in the power of collaboration, and I believe in the power of community, and we can do something amazing out of something that is currently very challenging and even scary.
It's heartening that you believe that. So there's hope.
There's hope.
That's great. Let's talk about BSides for a minute.
Yeah.
So, what do you like about BSides?
Oh goodness, what don't I like about BSides? BSides events are some of the best events. I know a lot of BSides organizers. I've been a BSides organizer myself.
I didn't know that.
I was part of BSides DC for several years, and in fact, I'm working on another BSides in my neighborhood that we'll have an announcement about probably next month. Yeah, it's just a great community. It's really shows how good an event can be when you're focused on the community aspect and trying to provide value for people. And value isn't necessarily, how many free goodies you get in a grab bag, or how many things a vendor can give away to you on a trade show floor. The value is in education, community, opportunities to network and to talk, and just to meet people and ask questions, no matter what stage of your career you are, but especially if you're new to the industry.
Nobody doesn't want to talk to you at a BSides.
Yeah, no, and there tend to be, generally BSides are very inexpensive. Some of them are even free. They're very approachable. A successful, a good starting BSides is like maybe 100 people, and that's often at a university campus or some sort of educational facility, and it may be free. And then very common to have BSides that are several hundred people to even there are many now over 1,000 people, and that's still at a scale in which the event is approachable and human scale, and you can meet people in the hallway and talk. There's a lot of very large industry conferences now, like Black Hat and DEF CON, and those are great for certain things, but they're just so large. You're talking like 25,000 people, 30,000 people. How do you find anybody in a hallway? How do you see somebody from your area and be like, hey, I'll meet up with you at lunch? You don't, unless you have a plan. So a BSides is where you can do stuff like that.
Absolutely. Cheryl, I'll ask you to add on to that. And a highlight for me was, of course, meeting you in person.
See, that's the beauty of it. And there's so much joy when you walk the halls into BSides, of people encountering old friends and people having these wonderful, spontaneous conversations that can just glow into the hours. And you come away with so much more than just, a conference badge. I have a wall of lanyards
You do.
for speaking opportunities, and I got my start, truly, thank you, from BSides Proving Ground in Las Vegas, where I was matched up with a mentor, and I was able to give back to the community doing that. It is the opportunity for people who are just starting out to be amongst a group of friendly, supportive, and highly interesting people like themselves who are going to open up doorways they didn't even know existed. And it can start with just giving that one presentation, asking that one question. This truly is that welcoming environment that you want to be a part of and then you can come back to. This is our first BSides Ottawa, and I just love it. And I've been able to meet people from other BSides here because you never know where people are going to go to next, and it's almost a family feel. So yeah, I love BSides.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Were you going to add to that?
I absolutely agree with all of that. And yeah, I think BSides, I believe now there's well over 1,000 BSides events that have
Wow.
occurred worldwide.
Amazing.
They do maintain a list on the BSides org website, which is going to get revamped at some point, I'm told. But yeah, it's been really an amazing movement overall. I believe, don't hold me to this, but I think this is now the 12th or 13th year that BSides has existed as a concept.
Okay.
And for there to be over 1,000 conferences globally, and I can't even imagine how many tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people have attended these events at this point.
That's amazing. And all, as Cheryl was saying, kind of spawning new people and new
Right.
speakers and new content as well.
Yeah.
And all community-based, volunteer-driven, good value for money.
Absolutely. And that's something that really gives a lot of hope. It's very inspirational. Thank you so much. Any other messages for the audience?
Oh, goodness.
We can have you here for a
Hack
few
the
days.
planet.
What's that?
Hack the planet.
Hack the planet. Okay. I love it. Thanks
All right.
so much
Thank
for
you.
spending time. Katie,
Yes.
there is so much to talk about with you. Maybe you could start by telling us a little bit about Hackers on the Hill and why you came to BSides.
Yeah, so Hackers on the Hill is an initiative that we started in Washington, D.C. a couple of years ago. And the idea is really to bring together policymakers and security practitioners, technologists to have informed conversations. So what we noticed was there were a lot of bills coming across, standards, regulations, laws, and they had really good intent. But the language didn't always make sense. And so sometimes the language had second, third order impacts that was actually damaging to the overall spirit of the law or the regulation. And so we thought, well, how do we fix this? And we thought, well, why don't we work together before the bill actually makes it onto the floor and before the bill or the law or the standard becomes in place, right? So we said, well, how about we bring together these security practitioners and congressional members and staffers? And so what we do is we put a call out and we say, hey, if you're in town and you're interested and you want to talk to a congressional staffer or a congressional member, we'd love to have you. And then we work the other side and we work with congressional members or their staffers, and we say, what are you interested in learning about? And then we match up the two in these small group sessions. So it's usually between 4 to 6 people in a small session for about an hour, and they can talk about whatever's on their mind. And from that, it builds the relationship, right? So the idea is that maybe that doesn't solve anything in that one meeting, but what happens is that that policymaker then has a Rolodex of people that they can talk to who maybe is not representing a company or their own interests. They're just trying to help and be altruistic and answer questions so that we can have this common language to build better policy. So that's the goal of Hackers on the Hill.
That's amazing. So this model didn't exist before Hackers on the Hill?
Not formally.
Right.
I think it probably always existed. You could always, we haven't done anything spectacular here, right? You could always book a meeting with a congressional staffer, and it doesn't even need to be your congressional staffer in the United States. You can always do a Capitol tour. You can always have that impact. But I think people just didn't know that it was available. And having that organization and some of that officialness around it, but also having that cadre of going with a group of people, I think really kind of changed it so that it felt more inviting.
Amazing. And then that small group kind of format,
Yeah.
how do you think that that's beneficial over other formats?
I think it allows people to have conversations that they may be maybe not willing to have in a bigger setting, right? It allows you to have a more in-depth conversation, and it allows you to really be like, the policymaker can say, hey, I've got a bill coming up that I'm championing or I've heard about. Can you give me advice on this? And instead of it being in a big session where there's lots of noise and conversation, you can have a personal conversation. And I think that's really important. So the small group formats worked really well for us. We also tend to have plenary plenary sessions as well in the morning, and to the big format. But I think having the mix of the two really is beneficial. It's really helpful.
That's really nice, especially when the intent is just learning and sharing.
We get nothing out of it.
That's
so
amazing.
all of us that volunteer to do it, we pay to do it ourselves. We show up, we help, we coordinate, we spend time doing it. We get nothing out of it other than just knowing that we've helped bridge the gap and facilitated the conversation, and that's what really matters to me and to like the folks that I work with, the organizers I work with.
That's great. And then it's called Hackers on the Hill. So is it always about cybersecurity?
It's really about technology.
Okay.
So we started out because that was the group, right? It was us, like my colleagues, and working in the hacking space. So finding vulnerabilities and getting these things fixed, and kind of hacker space. But it's really about technology, and technology and cybersecurity, they are co-linked, right? You can't really separate cybersecurity from technology. That's the long tail of technology.
It is. Is there anything that people have been surprised to learn out of these sessions?
I think that people come in a little bit wide-eyed, and they're like, oh my God, we're gonna go into the US Capitol building and talk to a senator, or talk to a congressman. And I think what they come out of it realizing is like, people are people, and people want to hear it, people want to talk, and I'm just like that, so it builds that camaraderie, and it builds that kind of like sense of humanity, and I think that matters. We also hopefully get some pretty good laws out of it. We increase the education level, we increase the understanding and the literacy, the technology literacy, and hopefully that will increase and make us so that we have better laws. Helps everybody.
It really does. I was recently very happy when I met a campaign manager who told me that they have their candidate watch my podcast actually to learn more about these kinds of issues before, like more proactively than they might have otherwise. And that's, creating a safe space for people to learn and ask questions about things that, may come across as very complex and are complex in a lot of cases.
Yeah, it's really important to have that translation, right? Because you have very complex issues in technology, and then you have really good intent, and they don't always speak the same language because they came from different places.
That's right.
And so having the bridge in the middle, somebody like you who's able to talk to both sides, it's invaluable.
That bridging is amazing. So what are you doing here in Ottawa?
So here in Ottawa, some colleagues of ours really enjoyed what we were doing and said, hey, we're in Ottawa, or we're in London, or we're in Colorado, and we'd really love to do this model, and can you help? And my colleagues and I do Hackers on the Hill said, absolutely, that would be wonderful. We'd love to help facilitate that.
Changing the world.
So that's what we're doing. We are here as representatives of the model, right? And so the local organizers, they do the work, and we are here to help facilitate, help coordinate, help smooth over, help make sure that any kind of little thing may not be thought of that is represented. And so we represent the model, and the local constituents do the work, and it's amazing.
That's terrific. That's good. Any other key messages for folks as we move forward from BSides?
Yeah, I think that it may feel very taboo to think about policy. And policy kind of seems a little scary, and it seems like something over there, like unless you went to school for public policy or poli-sci or something like that, you're like, oh, that's there. But it really does impact everyday life, right? We think about things down to, you can't just, if you don't have the internet, it's not just an inconvenience anymore. It's not just we'll open a book and you'll be fine. No, we're talking about health and safety of everything. And we can't look at any individual issue without understanding that technology has to be part of that. But you can't have good technology without good policy. And so when we think about everything from EPA, environmental protection laws, to social justice, to everything should include technology, because that's how we force enable, right? That's how we move forward in the digital age.
It's how we scale.
Exactly, it's how we scale, it's how we improve, it's how we move things forward in a progressive way, especially things like healthcare and critical safety systems. These things all have a technology aspect that needs to be considered, and not considered as an afterthought, considered as in the initial drafting at the base level. And so I would say policy is something that we should all be concerned about as citizens of the world, because technology is everywhere. It's globally connects us all. And so don't be afraid. I think that's my biggest takeaway. Don't be afraid, and you're not alone. If you want to be involved in policy, if you want to help inform policy, if you just want to work on technology, but understanding that there are so many pieces to this and everything is connected, I think is just
huge.
A huge part of it, yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
I love how you're bringing together, different parties who may be intimidated by each other, essentially,
but,
right?
we're all people.
Absolutely.
And we all have the same safety needs. We all have the same way of life. We all live together and on this, this big earth, and we should take care of each other.
We should, absolutely. Thank you so much for your impact and for coming to Ottawa. Really happy to have you.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
So, Julien, you're doing a lot with Hackers on the Hill and bringing that model here. Tell us about the need, and then tell us a little bit more about what you're doing.
Absolutely. So Hackers on the Hill, I was lucky enough to participate to a few in DC and in the US and realize that, hey, we're not doing anything like that in Canada. And everybody that I spoke about it to in Canada said this is something we absolutely need. And yet nobody was doing anything about it. And I figured, why not bring it here?
Well, tell us more about the need that we have in Canada.
Sure. So what happens in the policy space is that everything that happens in policy actually shapes or affects our work in cybersecurity. What we quickly realize is that cybersecurity also needs to inform policymakers. And what we get is usually lobbyists, people trying to sell their systems, people trying to sell their services or their products or anything like that. And we're not having real discussions about what's really happening without that business mindset, and that's what we're trying to build. We're just trying to create these connections, and I think a friend of mine calls it, the way that he says it is the best, is that it's my call a friend, right? So a politician can call a friend and go, hey, we want to do this thing. What do you think? And then we give our real thoughts, not the things that we are going to do to make money, but things that we're going to do to make society better. That's the idea.
That's great. And so is it up and running right now, or is this kind of in a startup phase?
So first of all, it's not an organization that's registered anywhere. The name is not incorporated. It's not a nonprofit. It's not anything, because as soon as you start putting those things in, then you got to start, you fall into lobbying laws, especially in the US and everything else. So this is just a group of altruistic people that want to help society. So it is up and running. We had a couple of visits up on Parliament Hill these last 2 days, and we've also had a village here at BSides, Ottawa, where we had policymakers and practitioners just talking about the higher level stuff than, hey, here's a cool vulnerability, here's how I found it, here's how we fix it, and then we're done and we move on to the next thing. Policy takes years and years and years to put into place, so we're kind of building that whole thing up.
Nice. And are they interested in finding things out and learning?
The best thing that I've had, we started last year, it was very small, and this year became something much bigger than I anticipated. And the best thing that I've heard more than one person say is, I had no idea what this is, I walked in the room, and then I didn't leave. And then the next day, I didn't even go anywhere else, and I'm sorry, BSides, but I don't want to take, I don't want to take the audience away, but it's just like, you see that there's a need when people tell you this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Are there particular topics that you find people are more curious about right now in this context?
Definitely. I think people are trying to find out ways where they can help. So every questions that we were getting, we had talks on regulating AI, we had talks on the quantum threat, we had a presentation on how a bill becomes law in Canada, and people were actually interested in Civics 101, schoolhouse rock stuff. And everybody who hears those conversations go, how can I help? Because they want to help. I think the message is just, it resonates with folks.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And then so for our listeners, how can people help? What are you looking for?
You need to get involved, and here we are in Ottawa, and I'm talking about going to Parliament Hill, and I'm talking about doing these big things with the bigger picture. But you can get started on your school board. You can get started on your municipality. Get on boards of small nonprofit organizations, and let's just talk about cybersecurity. Great example, a friend of mine out of Denver ran for on a school board, and one of the things that he found out as soon as he got there was that people were actually trying to install this monitoring software on school computers, but the school computers are tied to the students' personal email addresses, and when they log in at home, all of a sudden that software was getting downloaded on the home computer, and they were tracking everything that they were doing. The problem is that there's no cybersecurity people on these boards, and they don't know that this is a problem. Yeah. As soon as the person that had a bit of knowledge about IT and technology and cybersecurity immediately said, you're walking down the wrong path. We need to do something different with this. Yeah.
And how do people know who to trust, I guess? If you're part of a school board, or if you're part of any kind of board, or if you're part of a nonprofit and you don't have those resources, there's lots of there's lots of noise out there, I guess.
Yeah.
So how do people know who to trust?
The best part is that it's community, and before we started speaking, I talk a lot about community and everything else. And if you can find the right people that are in the community, they're going to be pretty public. They're going to be people that are experts, and if they're involved in the community in the nonprofit space, and I mean, these are all people that have jobs. Like I have a 9-to-5 job, but this thing is a volunteers to passion project. So when you look publicly of people that are doing the right thing in the right way, those are the people you can trust, as opposed to somebody who's always talking, makes a great point and then tries to sell something, or makes a great point and tries to promote themselves, their name, right? The trust comes from doing work in the community.
It's exciting to know that there are so many people out there that are seeing the issues and wanting to do good and just wanting to contribute. And I hope that we can harness that energy. Tell me a little bit about your excitement about the community right now and maybe how it's changed over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for me, it's hard to say over the years because, I got involved in community. I built a small community in Atlantic Canada where a bunch of people. Again, it's called a collective. Nobody's runs the thing. It's just a question of a bunch of people in a Discord group throwing memes around and sometimes having good discussions, right? And I found out that a lot of people have that need for community in cybersecurity. We work in front of a computer. My home office is in my basement, and there's no windows. I'm that quintessential, dude with the hoodie in his dark bed.
It's you in the stock images.
Very much so. But at the same time, whether you're an extrovert, an introvert, or an ambivert, it doesn't matter. You kind of want to talk about the things that you're interested in, right? And what I've found a lot is that I've invited a lot of people into the groups that we do in person, and I say, bring that cool piece of tech, right? If you're not comfortable talking to people or anything like that, bring that cool piece of tech, bring that little sticker, bring something, right? One time we had lock picks and locks, and some people didn't. They just wanted to be surrounded by people. They didn't really want to engage, but they wanted to be surrounded with people. And I think that's the difference. I think we're seeing that a lot more. And I think that cybersecurity, we're seeing a lot more people that want to have that social aspect.
Nice.
I mean, LobbyCon is great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? I go back to my room, I don't even take my shoes off. I lay in bed and go like, oh, right? But you can hear it, I'm energized.
Absolutely. And so what are you excited about for 2026?
Oh my God. Well, I want to grow the policy village. That's sure. I want it. I work with some folks in the U.S. But they want, we all want this to be Canada-led. We're trying to get this into the provinces. We're trying to get this all kinds of places. We're talking about all these little fringe groups that are trying to do the same thing. We may want to do a global, maybe put out content. So why are we doing this one time a year? It doesn't make sense. There's so much interest.
And so much changes over the course of a year too.
There were 250 people in the room, standing room only, right?
That's amazing.
And yeah, so what am I excited about? More of the same. Let's bring it on. Let's go.
That's awesome. Well, congrats on your success this
Thank
year.
you.
And
Thank you.
thanks for everything that you're doing for the community.
Thank you.